The morning sun cast a golden glow across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle, but inside the royal residence, the atmosphere felt heavy with unspoken emotion. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood by the window of their private quarters, her fingers gently tracing patterns on the glass as she watched the world outside begin to stir. She had barely slept, her mind racing through memories, moments, and the weight of what lay ahead. William found her there, just as he had every morning for the past week. He didn't need to ask what she was thinking. After years of marriage, of facing public scrutiny together, of raising 3 beautiful children under the watchful eyes of millions, they had developed a silent language all their own. He placed a hand on her shoulder and she leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. The decision had not been easy. Nothing about royal life ever was, but this particular choice had required months of careful consideration, countless sleepless nights and conversations that stretched into the early hours of morning. They had weighed every option, considered every consequence, and ultimately they knew what they had to do. The time had come to step back, to prioritize their family in a way that would shock the world but felt absolutely necessary to them. Catherine turned to face her husband, her eyes reflecting both sadness and determination. She thought about George, their eldest, who at 11 years old was beginning to understand the enormous responsibility that would one day rest on his shoulders. She thought about Charlotte, spirited and bright, who deserved a childhood filled with more than just protocol and duty. And little Louis, still so young, still so blissfully unaware of how different his life was from other children his age. The palace staff had noticed the change in atmosphere over recent weeks. Whispered conversations stopped abruptly when others entered the room. Private meetings stretched longer than usual. The usual warmth and easy smiles that Catherine and William shared seemed tinged with something deeper, something more profound. Those closest to them recognized the signs of an impending announcement, though none could have guessed the magnitude of what was coming. In the days leading up to this moment, Catherine had spent hours in the nursery, watching her children play, memorizing the sound of their laughter. She had walked through the palace gardens, touching the flowers she had helped plant, saying silent goodbyes to spaces that had become familiar. William had taken long walks alone, processing the gravity of their decision, knowing that once announced, there would be no turning back. The couple had first discussed the possibility late one autumn evening, after a particularly grueling week of royal duties. They had attended 17 engagements in 5 days, smiled for hundreds of photographs, shaken thousands of hands, all while their children remained at home, cared for by nannies and staff. That night, after tucking the children into bed, they sat together in their private sitting room, and William had spoken the words that had been weighing on both their hearts. "I'm watching our children grow up through photographs," he had said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. "I'm missing the moments that matter. We both are." Catherine had felt tears spring to her eyes because she knew he was right. They were present physically, but their minds were always partially elsewhere, planning the next engagement, preparing for the next speech, managing the next crisis. They were royals first and parents second, and somewhere along the way that priority had begun to feel wrong. The conversation had continued over weeks and months. They consulted with trusted advisors, spoke in confidence with family members, and considered the historical precedent. There were those who supported their thinking and those who urged them to reconsider. The Queen Consort had listened with understanding, having witnessed firsthand the toll that royal duty could take on family life. King Charles, while initially surprised, had eventually come to understand his son's reasoning. What the public didn't know, what the media couldn't report, was the personal struggle that had led to this decision. Catherine had experienced several panic attacks in recent months, overwhelmed by the constant pressure and the feeling that she was failing both as a royal and as a mother. William had witnessed his wife, usually so composed and graceful, break down in private, and it had broken something in him too. They remembered the promises they had made to each other on their wedding day, promises that went beyond the public vows. They had sworn to protect each other, to prioritize their family, to never let the institution consume them entirely. For years they had tried to balance everything, to be the perfect royals while also being present parents. But balance had become increasingly impossible to maintain. The children had begun to notice. George had asked why other fathers could coach football teams while his father was always busy. Charlotte had wondered aloud why her mother couldn't come to school events like other mums. Louis, sweet Louis, had simply asked if they could be a normal family just for one day. Those innocent questions had pierced their hearts more deeply than any criticism from the press ever could. William thought back to his own childhood, to the memories of his mother, Princess Diana, and how her struggle with royal life had ultimately ended in tragedy. He had promised himself that he would never let history repeat itself, that he would protect his own family with a fierceness that came from deeply personal experience. He looked at Catherine now, seeing in her the same strength his mother had possessed, but also seeing the strain that was beginning to show. They had explored every alternative. Could they reduce their royal duties while remaining in their current roles? Could they create better boundaries? Could they shield the children more effectively? But every solution seemed incomplete, every compromise felt insufficient. The realization had come gradually but undeniably. Something fundamental had to change. The palace communications team had been preparing for this announcement for weeks, crafting statements, anticipating reactions, preparing for the media storm that would inevitably follow, but no amount of preparation could truly ready anyone for what was about to happen. This wasn't just another royal statement or minor adjustment to duties. This was a seismic shift that would reverberate through the monarchy and capture the attention of the entire world. As Catherine and William stood together that morning, hands intertwined, they knew they were about to cross a threshold. Behind them lay years of service, duty, and sacrifice. Ahead lay uncertainty, criticism, and likely condemnation from some quarters. But somewhere in that unknown future also lay the possibility of something they had been missing: genuine peace, real family time, and the chance to raise their children in a way that felt right to them, not just to tradition and expectation. The announcement was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, time to reach the maximum global audience. Catherine had chosen her outfit carefully, a simple navy dress that conveyed both respect for the occasion and a sense of moving toward something new. She wore her grandmother's pearls, a connection to her own family history, a reminder of where she had come from before she became a princess. William dressed in a suit rather than military uniform, a subtle but significant choice. They were speaking today not as representatives of the crown, but as a husband and wife, as parents, as human beings making an extraordinarily difficult decision. The symbolism would not be lost on those who understood the intricacies of royal protocol. Before heading to the press room, they stopped by the nursery one final time. The children were with their governess, engaged in afternoon lessons, unaware that their parents were about to change the trajectory of their lives. Catherine knelt down beside Louis, brushing his hair from his forehead, memorizing the feel of his soft curls. William sat with George, having a quiet conversation about bravery and doing what feels right even when it's difficult. Charlotte, perceptive as always, sensed something momentous was happening. "Mummy, are you sad?" she asked, her small hand reaching for Catherine's. "No, darling," Catherine replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "Mummy and Daddy are going to do something very important today, something that will help us spend more time together as a family. Would you like that?" Charlotte's face lit up with a smile that made everything they were about to do feel absolutely right. "Yes, please," she said simply. And in those 2 words, Catherine found all the confirmation she needed. The walk to the press room felt longer than it actually was. Staff members they passed looked at them with expressions ranging from support to concern, to barely concealed disapproval. Not everyone understood or agreed with what they were doing. There were those who believed duty should always come first, that personal desires were secondary to royal responsibility. The couple had heard the whispered criticisms, the suggestions that they were being selfish, that they were letting down the institution. But they had also received private messages of support from unexpected quarters. Former palace staff who had watched them struggle, mental health professionals who understood the toll of constant public scrutiny, even other members of European royal families who had faced similar struggles in trying to modernize centuries-old institutions while protecting their families. The press room was filled to capacity. Journalists from around the world sat with notebooks ready, cameras positioned for the perfect shot. The air hummed with anticipation and speculation. Rumors had been circulating for days, but no one quite knew what to expect. Some thought perhaps they were announcing a new charity initiative. Others wondered if Catherine might be pregnant again. No one anticipated the truth. As William and Catherine entered together, the room fell silent. They took their positions behind the podium, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, drawing strength from their partnership. Then William began to speak, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you all for being here today. Catherine and I have asked you to join us because we need to share something with the British people and with the world, something we have given tremendous thought and consideration to over many months." He paused, gathering himself. Catherine placed her hand over his, a gesture of unity that would be captured in photographs and replayed endlessly in the coming days. "As many of you know, we have dedicated our lives to service, to representing the Crown, to supporting the causes and communities that matter deeply to us. It has been the greatest honor of our lives, and we have never taken that responsibility lightly." The journalist leaned forward, sensing that something significant was coming. "However, we have also been blessed with 3 beautiful children who deserve to have their parents present, not just physically but emotionally and mentally. George, Charlotte, and Louis are at ages where they need us in ways that are impossible to fully provide, while maintaining the level of royal duty we have been committed to." Catherine took over, her voice clear despite the emotion she was feeling. "We have watched our children grow up faster than we ever imagined. We have missed school plays and sports days. We have said goodnight over video calls when we should have been tucking them into bed. We have tried so hard to balance everything, to be good royals and good parents. But we have come to realize that we cannot continue as we have been." The room was absolutely silent now. The magnitude of what was being said was beginning to sink in. Therefore, after extensive discussion with His Majesty the King and other senior members of the royal family, we have made the decision to step back from our full-time royal duties. William continued. "We will retain our titles and will continue to support His Majesty and represent the Crown when specifically requested, but we will no longer maintain the schedule of engagements we have previously committed to." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Cameras flashed continuously. Journalists began typing frantically, already composing headlines, already imagining the reaction this would generate. Catherine spoke again, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "This has been the most difficult decision we have ever made. We love this country. We love the people we have had the privilege to meet and work with. We believe deeply in service and in duty, but we also believe that our first duty is to our children, to give them the childhood they deserve, to be the parents they need us to be." William's voice grew stronger as he continued. "We have seen too many examples in royal history of children who grew up feeling abandoned by parents who put duty above everything else. We have witnessed the pain that causes, the lasting damage it creates. We refuse to let that be our children's story. We refuse to sacrifice their well-being on the altar of tradition." There was a defiance in his words now, a clear message to anyone who would criticize their choice. This was not a decision made lightly or selfishly. This was a decision made out of love, out of a determination to break cycles that had caused harm for generations. "We want to be clear," Catherine added. "We are not abandoning our responsibilities entirely. We will continue to support causes close to our hearts. We will represent the monarchy when called upon. But we will do so in a way that allows us to also be fully present for George, Charlotte, and Louis. We will live a life that feels authentic to us, that honors both our commitment to service and our commitment to our family." The questions came fast and furious after that. Where would they live? What would happen to their royal patronages? How had the king reacted? What about the line of succession? William and Catherine answered what they could, deflected what they couldn't, and throughout it all, maintained their composure and their united front. But it was Catherine's final statement that would be replayed most often, that would touch hearts around the world. "We are doing this because we love our children more than we fear criticism. We hope that in time, people will understand that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your family, even when the world expects you to choose differently." The world's reaction was instantaneous and divided. Within minutes of the announcement, social media exploded with opinions ranging from overwhelming support to harsh condemnation. News channels interrupted regular programming to discuss the implications. Royal commentators who had spent years analyzing every gesture and outfit choice now found themselves struggling to process what had just happened. In living rooms across Britain, families gathered around television screens, watching the replay of the announcement. debating what it meant for the future of the monarchy. Older generations, who had grown up with a strict understanding of royal duty, expressed shock and disappointment. They remembered Queen Elizabeth II, who had dedicated her entire life to service, who had put duty above personal happiness at every turn. To them, William and Catherine's decision felt like a betrayal of everything the monarchy stood for. But younger people told a different story. On university campuses, in coffee shops, in group chats and online forums, millennials and Gen Z praised the couple's courage. They saw in William and Catherine's choice a reflection of their own values, a prioritization of mental health and family well-being over outdated expectations. Parents especially resonated with the message, understanding the impossible position of trying to be everything to everyone while feeling like you were failing at what mattered most. The palace switchboard was overwhelmed with calls. Letters began arriving by the thousands, some expressing support, others demanding that William and Catherine reconsider. A few were cruel, attacking Catherine in particular, suggesting she had influenced William, portraying her as the villain in a story where there truly were no villains, only people making an impossible choice. The British tabloids had a field day. Headlines screamed about royal crisis, about the end of the monarchy as it had been known, about duty versus desire. Some papers painted William and Catherine as selfish, publishing unflattering photographs, from years past digging up any controversy they could find. Others defended the couple, running pieces about the mental health crisis in modern Britain, about the importance of present parenting, about the need for the monarchy to evolve. International media picked up the story with equal fervor. American outlets compared it to when Harry and Meghan had stepped back from royal duties years earlier, though this situation was different in crucial ways. William was second in line to the throne. His decision had far greater constitutional implications. European newspapers analyzed what this meant for their own royal families, many of whom were already grappling with questions about relevance and modernization in the 21st century. Inside the palace walls, the atmosphere was tense. King Charles had released a brief statement expressing his support for his son and daughter-in-law's decision, acknowledging their dedication to their children, while reaffirming his own commitment to duty. But those close to the king knew he was struggling with the situation. He had waited his entire life to become monarch, had dedicated decades to preparing William for the same role, and now everything felt uncertain. Queen Camilla proved to be an unexpected source of support. She understood better than most the challenge of navigating royal life while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She had watched Charles struggle with the same tensions between duty and family, had seen the toll it took. In private conversations with Catherine, she offered words of encouragement and wisdom, reminding her that choosing to prioritize family didn't mean abandoning duty entirely. The children, mercifully, remained largely shielded from the storm. Their school had been briefed and had increased security measures. Teachers were instructed not to discuss the announcement or to allow other students to harass them about it. George, being older, had some awareness of what was happening. He had seen his parents on television, had heard whispered conversations among staff. But William and Catherine sat with him that evening, explaining in age-appropriate terms what they had done and why. "Does this mean we're not royal anymore?" George had asked, his young face serious with concern. "You will always be Prince George," William had assured him. "Nothing changes about who you are. What changes is how much time Mummy and Daddy will have to spend with you. We'll still have responsibilities, but we'll also be able to come to your football matches and help with your homework, and be there when you need us." Charlotte, ever the empathetic one, had asked if people were angry with them. Catherine had held her daughter close, choosing her words carefully. "Some people don't understand yet, darling. They think we should make different choices. But Daddy and I know what's best for our family, and eventually, everyone will understand that too." As the days passed, the immediate shock began to settle into ongoing debate. Television documentaries were rushed into production, examining the history of royal duty, comparing William's decision to other pivotal moments in monarchy history. Constitutional experts weighed in on the implications for succession. Child. Psychologists discussed the impact of public life on young people. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone wanted to share it. Support for the couple began to grow as the initial shock wore off. A poll showed that 63% of British people under 40 supported their decision, viewing it as a healthy and necessary evolution of the monarchy. Parents' groups issued statements praising William and Catherine for prioritizing their children's well-being. Mental health organizations noted the powerful message it sent about putting family and mental health first. But the criticism remained fierce in certain quarters. Traditional monarchists argued that this set a dangerous precedent, that if William could step back, what was to stop other royals from doing the same? Conservative commentators suggested that the couple was undermining the very institution that had given them their privileged position. Some went so far as to call for them to be removed from the line of succession entirely, though constitutional experts quickly clarified that such action would require parliamentary approval and was highly unlikely. Through it all, William and Catherine maintained their dignity and their silence. They had said what they needed to say. They had made their decision. Now they focused on the practical aspects of their new life. They began the process of reducing their royal household staff, keeping only those essential for their reduced role. They reviewed their patronages, determining which they would keep and which would need to be transferred to other royals. The transition was not easy. There were tense meetings with palace officials about housing arrangements, about funding, about protocol. Some members of the extended royal family were supportive, while others were openly critical. William's relationship with his father became strained, though both men were trying to find a way forward. Catherine fielded difficult conversations with her own family, who worried about the backlash she was facing and wanted to protect her. But in quieter moments, away from cameras and commentary, William and Catherine found peace in their decision. They had dinner with their children every night that first week, something that had been rare in their previous life. They helped with homework and read bedtime stories. They woke up without immediately checking schedules and engagement calendars. They began to breathe in a way they hadn't in years. One evening, as they sat together after the children had gone to bed, Catherine turned to William with tears in her eyes. "Did we do the right thing?" she asked, the weight of all the criticism finally breaking through her composure. William pulled her close, his own emotions raw. "I watched Louis laugh today," he said quietly. "Really laugh, the kind of pure joy that children have. And you know what I realized? I couldn't remember the last time I had been present enough to really see it. So yes, Catherine, we did the right thing. For them, for us, for our family. Whatever else happens, we did the right thing." In that moment, holding each other in the gathering darkness, they knew that the hardest part was yet to come, the real work of rebuilding their lives, of defining what it meant to be semi-working royals, of protecting their children from the ongoing media scrutiny. All of that still lay ahead, but they also knew they would face it together, as they had faced everything else, united in their commitment to each other and to their family. 3 weeks after the announcement, William and Catherine prepared for their final full royal engagement before transitioning to their new arrangement. They had been asked to attend a children's hospital opening, an event that felt particularly meaningful given the reasons behind their decision. As they drove through London, Catherine noticed how different everything felt now. The crowds were still there, but they seemed to look at the couple differently, with a mixture of curiosity, sympathy, and in some cases, genuine admiration. The hospital visit proved to be more emotional than either had anticipated. Parents approached them with tears in their eyes, thanking them for choosing their children, sharing their own struggles with balancing work and family. One mother, whose daughter was undergoing treatment for leukemia, grabbed Catherine's hand and said, "You're showing my daughter that even princesses have to make hard choices to protect the people they love. Thank you for that lesson." Catherine struggled to maintain her composure. These were the moments that made everything they were giving up feel worthwhile. These connections with real people, these genuine expressions of support, reminded them why they had entered public service in the first place, and why they were choosing to continue it, just in a different way. William found himself in conversation with a young boy who was recovering from surgery. The child asked him directly, with the unfiltered honesty only children possess, "Are you sad about not being a working royal anymore?" William crouched down to the boy's eye level, considering his answer carefully. "I'm not sad," he said finally. "I'm grateful. I get to spend more time with my own children now, just like your parents want to spend time with you. Sometimes the most important job we have is just being there for the people we love." The boy nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer, and William realized that children understood this decision in a way many adults couldn't. They grasped intuitively that presence mattered more than prestige. That time was more valuable than titles. After the hospital visit, William and Catherine returned to their residence to find a private letter waiting from Queen Camilla. In it, she wrote about her own regrets from when her children were young, about opportunities missed in pursuit of other obligations. She encouraged them to stay strong in their conviction, to ignore the noise from critics who had never faced the impossible choices that came with royal life. The letter meant more to Catherine than any public statement of support ever could. That evening, they had a long scheduled dinner with several members of the royal household, a farewell of sorts to the staff who had supported them for years. The atmosphere was bittersweet. Some staff members were continuing with them in reduced capacities, while others were being reassigned to other royals or leaving royal service entirely. Private secretaries who had coordinated hundreds of engagements now faced uncertain futures. Press officers who had managed their public image would need to find new roles. Catherine made a point of speaking personally with each staff member, thanking them for their service, acknowledging the difficulty of the transition. She knew that their decision had ripple effects far beyond their own family, that other people's livelihoods were being affected. The guilt of that weighed on her, even though she knew they had made the right choice. One of their longest-serving aides, a woman named Margaret who had been with them since their engagement, pulled Catherine aside. "Your Royal Highness," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've worked in this palace for 32 years. I've served 3 generations of royals, and I want you to know that what you and Prince William are doing is the bravest thing I've ever witnessed in all that time. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The words struck Catherine deeply. Here was someone who embodied everything traditional about royal service, who had dedicated her life to the institution, and yet she understood. She supported them. It was a reminder that not everyone who valued duty believed it had to come at the cost of family. As the dinner wound down, William stood to address the gathered staff. He spoke about gratitude, about the impossible job they all did in serving both the institution and the individuals within it. He acknowledged the uncertainty ahead and promised that they would do everything possible to ensure no one was left without support or opportunity. But most importantly, he spoke about change. "The monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years because it has been willing to evolve," he said. "Not quickly, not easily, but eventually. What Catherine and I are doing is part of that evolution. We're trying to show that it's possible to serve the crown while also serving our family, to honor tradition, while also adapting to modern understanding of health and well-being. We don't have all the answers. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to try, and we hope you'll support us as we do." The applause that followed was genuine and heartfelt. Whatever uncertainties lay ahead, they would face them with the support of people who truly understood the impossible position they had been in. Later that night, unable to sleep, William found himself in his study, looking through old photographs. Images of his mother, Princess Diana, smiling at the camera but with sadness in her eyes. Pictures of himself as a child, always formally dressed, always aware of being watched. Photos of his own children at official events, learning to wave, learning to pose, learning to be royal before they had even learned to be themselves. He thought about the cycle he was breaking, the generational trauma he was refusing to pass on. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had been an extraordinary monarch, but had by her own admission struggled as a mother, often prioritizing duty over maternal presence. His father, King Charles, had been largely raised by staff, and had carried that emotional distance into his own parenting. William had experienced that distance firsthand and had vowed his children would not. The criticism that hurt most was when people compared their decision to Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties years earlier. While there were surface similarities, William felt the situations were entirely different. Harry had left feeling rejected by the institution, had walked away in anger and pain. William and Catherine were not walking away at all. They were trying to find a middle path, a way to remain connected while also protecting their family. They were not rejecting duty, but redefining it. Catherine joined him in the study, also unable to sleep. They sat together in comfortable silence, no words needed. They had been through so much together. The early days of their relationship under intense media scrutiny. The pressure of the wedding watched by billions. The joy and terror of becoming parents. The constant balancing act of royal life. This was just another challenge, albeit one of their own making. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day?" Catherine asked softly. "After all the cameras were gone and it was just us?" William smiled, remembering. "I promised that I would never let the institution consume you, that I would protect you the way my father couldn't protect my mother." "You're keeping that promise," Catherine said, squeezing his hand. "To me and to our children. Whatever anyone else says, you're keeping your promise." In the days that followed, they began the practical work of setting up their new life. They chose a home outside of London, still within reasonable distance of royal duties, but far enough to feel like a genuine escape from the intensity of palace life. It was a sprawling country house with enough land for the children to roam, to play, to simply be children without constant scrutiny. George was enrolled in a new school, one that valued academic excellence but also emphasized well-being, and allowed for more normalcy. Charlotte and Louis would attend as well, all three siblings together, able to support each other through the unique challenges of being young royals in a changing monarchy. The school had experience with high-profile families and had strict policies about privacy and media access. Catherine began reaching out to the patronages she would be keeping, having honest conversations about her reduced availability, and finding ways to make her involvement meaningful even if less frequent. She discovered that quality mattered more than quantity, that she could have a greater impact by being fully present for fewer events, rather than partially present for many. The first month in their new home felt like learning to breathe again. Catherine woke each morning to the sound of birds rather than the distant hum of London traffic. She could walk through the garden without wondering if telephoto lenses were capturing her every move. The children ran through the house with a freedom they had never known, their laughter echoing off walls that held no history of royal protocol. William discovered the simple joy of routine. He drove George to school himself, joining the queue of parents dropping off their children, experiencing those ordinary moments that had always been denied to him. Other parents were respectful but not obsequious, treating him with the kind of friendly distance that allowed for normalcy. He found himself discussing football matches and homework assignments rather than state affairs and diplomatic considerations. Charlotte thrived in the new environment. She had always been a bright, spirited child, but in their previous life that spirit had been constantly moderated, controlled, shaped to fit royal expectations. Now she could be loud when she wanted to be loud, could get dirty playing in the garden, could express opinions without worrying about how they might be interpreted by the press. Catherine watched her daughter blossom and felt vindicated in every difficult choice they had made. Louis, still young enough to adapt easily, seemed happiest of all. He had his parents available in ways his older siblings never had at his age. When he scraped his knee, it was Catherine who cleaned and bandaged it, not a nanny. When he had questions about the world, William was there to answer them. The security of that presence, the knowledge that his parents were truly there, created a foundation that would serve him throughout his life. But the transition was not without challenges. William struggled with guilt, wondering if he was abandoning a duty that had been bred into him since birth. There were moments when he second-guessed everything, when news coverage of royal events they were not attending made him feel like a failure. Catherine would find him brooding, caught in spirals of doubt about whether they had made the right decision. During one particularly difficult evening, as William wrestled with feelings of guilt after seeing his father attend a major state event alone, Catherine sat beside him and spoke with unusual directness. "You are not your father's failure," she said firmly. "You are not abandoning him. You are breaking a cycle that has caused harm for generations. Your father had a choice too, and he chose differently. That doesn't make either choice wrong, but it does mean you get to make your own decision about what kind of father you want to be." Her words cut through his spiral of doubt. She was right. This was not about rejecting his heritage or abandoning responsibility. This was about consciously choosing a different path, about believing that the monarchy could evolve to accommodate different ways of serving. They made a point of maintaining some royal duties, carefully selected to align with causes they genuinely cared about. Catherine continued her work with early childhood development, though now she engaged more deeply with fewer organizations rather than spreading herself thin across dozens of patronages. William remained involved with conservation efforts and veteran support, bringing a level of personal commitment that had been impossible when his calendar was crammed with obligatory appearances. The public began to see them in a new light. Without the constant stream of formal engagements, each appearance they did make felt more meaningful. People appreciated that when William and Catherine showed up, they were truly present, engaged, interested. They weren't checking watches or rushing to the next event. They had time for genuine conversations, for listening to people's stories, for making real connections. A defining moment came 3 months into their new arrangement when Catherine attended a mental health conference. She had been invited to speak, and rather than delivering a carefully vetted speech prepared by Palace communications staff, she spoke from her own experience. She talked about the panic attacks she had experienced, about the feeling of drowning under expectations, about the courage it took to admit she needed a different life. The response was overwhelming. People lined up afterward to share their own struggles, their own moments of choosing well-being over expectation. Mental health organizations praised her vulnerability and authenticity. Even some of the tabloids that had been most critical of her decision published positive coverage, acknowledging the powerful message she was sending about prioritizing mental health. William watched the speech from the audience, tears in his eyes filled with pride and love for his wife. She had been through so much, had endured criticism and judgment, yet here she was turning their struggle into something that could help others. She was proving that you could be royal and real, that you could have a title and still be human. The relationship with King Charles slowly began to heal. The king came to visit their new home, something he had rarely done even when they lived in royal residences. He played with his grandchildren in a way he never had with his own children, getting down on the floor with Louis, kicking a football with George, having tea parties with Charlotte. Catherine watched him with her children and saw in him a sadness, a recognition of everything he had missed with William and Harry. One afternoon, as the children played in the garden, Charles and William sat together on the terrace. The king was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. "I envy you," he said simply. "I envy the courage it took to do what you've done. I told myself for years that duty was everything, that personal happiness was secondary. I watched your mother struggle and I told myself there was no other way. But there was. There always was. I just didn't have the strength to find it." William felt a lump form in his throat. His father had never been this vulnerable, this honest. "You did your best with what you knew," William said quietly. "You were raised in a different time, with different expectations. I'm not judging you. I'm just trying to do things differently." Charles nodded, his eyes glistening. "You are a better father than I ever was. A better man. I'm proud of you, William. I should have said that from the beginning." The reconciliation between father and son was not complete, but it was a beginning. They were learning to understand each other across generations, across different choices, across the gulf that duty had created between them for so long. As autumn arrived, the family settled into rhythms that felt natural and right. School runs and homework help, family dinners and weekend adventures. They visited museums without advance warning, went to the cinema like ordinary families, walked through villages where people nodded respectfully but didn't create a scene. Security was still present but less intrusive, allowing for moments of genuine normalcy. George began to excel in subjects he had struggled with before, his confidence growing now that he had parental support at home. Charlotte joined a local drama group and discovered a passion for performance. Louis started learning piano, filling their home with music, both beautiful and beginner-level chaotic. These were the ordinary miracles of childhood that William and Catherine had been missing, and now they treasured each moment. The media coverage gradually shifted as well. While some outlets continued to criticize, others began publishing think pieces about work-life balance, about the importance of present parenting, about whether traditional notions of duty needed to evolve. Younger journalists especially championed William and Catherine as examples of healthy boundary setting, of prioritizing what truly mattered. A turning point came when a respected royal biographer published an article comparing different generations of royal parenting. She documented the emotional struggles of previous royal children, the patterns of absence and formality that had caused lasting damage. She contrasted this with William and Catherine's choice, arguing that they were not weakening, the monarchy, but strengthening it by ensuring their children would grow up emotionally healthy and prepared for future responsibilities. The article sparked national conversation. Suddenly, the debate was no longer about whether William and Catherine were shirking duty, but about whether the old model of royal life was sustainable or healthy. Psychologists weighed in, discussing the developmental needs of children. Historians provided context about other periods when the monarchy had evolved to survive. The conversation deepened beyond simple criticism into genuine examination of what modern royalty should look like. Through it all, William and Catherine remained focused on what mattered most: their family. They celebrated small victories, like George learning to ride a bike with William running alongside him, or Charlotte performing in her first school play with both parents in the audience, or Louis taking his first swimming lesson with Catherine cheering from the pool edge. These were the moments that justified everything they had given up, everything they had risked. On a crisp November evening, as they sat together watching the children play board games by the fireplace, Catherine turned to William with contentment in her eyes. "I don't miss it," she said softly. "The constant engagements, the pressure, the feeling of never being enough for anyone. I thought I would miss it, but I don't." William smiled, understanding completely. "Neither do I. I miss some aspects, the sense of contributing to something larger than ourselves. But we're still doing that. We're just doing it differently now. And this?" He gestured to their children, absorbed in their game, bickering good-naturedly over rules. "This is the most important thing we'll ever do." They had given up much, but they had gained more. They had traded constant public visibility for genuine family connection. They had exchanged endless obligations for meaningful presence. They had chosen their children over expectation, love over duty, authenticity over appearance, and in doing so, they had shown the world that even royals were human, that even princesses and princes needed to put family first sometimes, that there was strength in admitting when a life was unsustainable, and courage in changing course. A year after their announcement, William and Catherine stood together at a charity gala, their first major public appearance in months. The event supported children's mental health services, a cause deeply personal to them both. As they entered the venue, cameras flashed and crowds cheered, but something was different now. The desperation for their attention had softened into something more respectful, more understanding. During their speech that evening, Catherine spoke about the journey they had been on, the lessons they had learned. "A year ago, we made a decision that many questioned. We chose to step back from full-time royal duties to focus on being present for our children. People asked if we were being selfish, if we were abandoning our responsibilities. Tonight I want to share what we've learned." She paused, gathering her thoughts, William's supportive presence beside her giving her strength. "We've learned that you cannot pour from an empty cup. We've learned that being present for your children is not selfish, it's essential. We've learned that duty to family and duty to country are not mutually exclusive, but they require balance and honesty about what is sustainable." The audience listened in rapt attention. These were not carefully scripted royal remarks. This was genuine reflection, hard-won wisdom shared authentically. "Most importantly," Catherine continued, "we've learned that asking for help, admitting when something isn't working, and making difficult changes is not weakness, it's strength. And we hope that by being open about our own struggles, we've helped even one family feel less alone in their challenges." The standing ovation that followed was not just for royalty, but for two people who had been brave enough to be vulnerable, real enough to admit struggle, strong enough to change course. William watched his wife with overwhelming pride, seeing in her the woman he had fallen in love with years ago, now more confident and authentic than ever before. After the gala, they drove home through the quiet countryside, the city lights fading behind them. George, Charlotte, and Louis were asleep when they arrived, and William and Catherine stood in the doorway of each child's room, watching them sleep peacefully, free from the anxieties that had once plagued them. George's room was decorated with posters of football players and scientists, his own interests rather than what was deemed appropriately royal. Charlotte's space was filled with art supplies and books about strong women throughout history. Louis's room contained a collection of toy dinosaurs and musical instruments, his personality emerging freely without constraint. These rooms told a story of children who were being allowed to discover who they were, not who they were expected to be. That was the real gift William and Catherine had given them, more valuable than any title or privilege. In the following months, something remarkable happened. Other royal families across Europe began quietly following their example. A Swedish prince reduced his official duties to focus on his young children. A Danish princess spoke openly about the challenges of balancing royal life with motherhood. The conversation William and Catherine had started rippled outward, changing perspectives on what modern royalty could look like. The British public opinion continued to shift as well. Polls showed increasing support for their decision, especially among parents and young people. The monarchy's approval ratings actually improved as people appreciated the humanizing of the institution. William and Catherine had feared their choice would damage the crown, but in reality, they had made it more relatable, more relevant, more sustainable for future generations. King Charles, watching his son and daughter-in-law from a distance, found himself reflecting on his own choices. He began making subtle changes to his own approach, spending more intentional time with his grandchildren, being more open about the challenges of royal life. The institution was evolving, and William and Catherine's courage had been the catalyst. On a spring morning, exactly 18 months after their announcement, the family gathered in their garden for a quiet celebration of Charlotte's birthday. No photographers were invited. No official portrait would be released. This was just for them, a simple family party with close friends and loved ones. As Catherine watched her daughter blow out candles surrounded by friends, both royal and ordinary, she felt a profound sense of peace. Charlotte's face was alight with joy, unburdened by expectations or protocol. This was what childhood should look like. This was what they had fought for. William stood beside his wife, his arm around her waist, watching the same scene. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." Catherine leaned into him, her heart full. "We did, and look at them." Really look at them, he did. He saw George helping Louis with a party game, patient and kind. He saw Charlotte laughing freely, comfortable in her own skin. He saw children who felt secure in their parents' love, who understood they were valued for who they were, not just what they represented. Later that evening, after guests had departed and children had been tucked into bed, William and Catherine sat on their back terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The official portrait of their family that had been released earlier that week had generated enormous positive response. Unlike formal royal portraits of the past, this one showed them in casual clothes in their garden. The children mid-laugh, everyone relaxed and genuine. "Do you have any regrets?" Catherine asked, though she knew the answer. William was quiet for a moment, considering honestly. "I regret that it took us so long to make this choice. I regret the time we lost trying to be everything to everyone. But this decision, never. Not for a single moment." They had received a letter that week from a mother in Manchester who had been struggling with severe burnout, trying to maintain a high-pressure career while raising 3 children. She had written that seeing William and Catherine choose their family had given her permission to make changes in her own life. She had reduced her work hours, prioritized time with her children, and found peace she hadn't known in years. "Thank you for showing me it was possible," she had written. That letter and hundreds like it reminded them that their choice had impact far beyond their own family. They had given people permission to prioritize well-being over appearances, to value presence over prestige, to understand that sometimes the most important duty is to the people right in front of you. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Catherine thought about the journey they had been on. From that morning a year and a half ago when they had stood at the window, heavy with the weight of their decision, to this moment of profound contentment. The path had not been easy, but it had been right. "What do you think people will remember about us?" Catherine asked, her voice thoughtful in the gathering darkness. William considered this, his mind spanning their years of service, their decision to step back, and everything that had followed. "I hope they remember that we tried to be human, that we loved our children enough to make difficult choices, that we believed family and duty could coexist, just differently than they had before, and maybe, hopefully, that we helped change the conversation about what it means to have a meaningful life." Catherine nodded, satisfied with that legacy. They were not perfect parents or perfect royals, but they were present, authentic, and committed to breaking cycles that had caused harm. That felt like enough. In the years that followed, their children would grow up with a foundation of security and presence, that previous generations of royals had lacked. George would approach his future responsibilities with a healthy understanding of balance and boundaries. Charlotte would become a fierce advocate for mental health and women's rights, inspired by her mother's courage. Louis would pursue his passion for music while also fulfilling royal duties, embodying the integration his parents had fought for. But all of that was still ahead. On this evening, in this moment, William and Catherine simply sat together in the peaceful darkness, hands intertwined, hearts full. They had made their choice, weathered the storm, and emerged stronger. They had shown the world that love could triumph over expectation, that courage could reshape tradition, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply be present for the people who needed you most. The stars overhead seemed to shine more brightly. Or perhaps that was just how everything felt now that they were finally, truly free. Free to be parents first, royals second. Free to prioritize what mattered most. Free to live authentically, even under the weight of a crown. Their graceful goodbye to full-time royal life had indeed touched the world deeply. But the hello to a new way of being had touched their family even more profoundly. And in the end, that was what mattered most. That was the legacy they were most proud of. Not the engagements attended or ribbons cut, but the bedtime stories read, the scraped knees comforted, the childhood memories created. That was the royal duty that would last forever, the one that truly changed the future of their family and their institution. As they finally rose to go inside, Catherine turned back for one last look at their home, at the life they had built, at the peace they had found. William stood beside her, and together they walked toward the warmth and light of their house, toward their sleeping children, toward a future they had chosen for themselves. It was not the traditional path, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful,